Hi there everyone. I hope that you're fine and well, and I am welcoming you to my first video on the aforementioned airline bailouts topic. I have done the last video last Sunday and talked about it, that I would like to do this kind of series of videos on this. So here I am, the first of I think at least 2 or 3 videos, because this is really a topic that is worthwhile talking about. It's all over the airline industry news in the last weeks and months, when airlines are trying to prepare, well, to overcome this crisis at the moment and then to prepare for the future. So bailouts are very important in that aspect. And so let's dive right in this first board. And by the way, this little board is the reason why this video got a bit delayed. As I said last video, I waited for quite some time for it to arrive, so now it's here, and let's dive right in. So what I would like to do in this first board is, first of all, to talk about some introductory and methodological questions. First and foremost, let's agree on a definition on a bailout, because I have also read in the research for this video that in terms of the interpretation of money being given either as grants or loans to different airlines, some of the articles talk about bailouts, some of it talk about other type of help, let's say. So let's dive right in. The definition here I took from the Oxford Business Dictionary, or it was Cambridge, sorry. But yeah, it was one of the two. I think it was Cambridge in the end. Anyway, through a renowned dictionary. And it says, so a loan or other financial support given to a person, company, or country to help them when they are in financial difficulties. Now, I found that particularly helpful because if we agree on this broad definition, then we agree that really most, if not all, money that is spent by either governments or other entities towards airlines these days can be, under this definition, being interpreted as a form of bailout. Now, in terms of the methodology, how I will proceed here, I will talk in this video, and in the next few videos I will talk about different case studies, and I will try in these case studies to focus not only on bigger airlines, big economically, big in terms of employees and sheer size, but also I will try to include some, here and there, also some carriers that are maybe not as big as others, but globally speaking, but are very important for the local or regional economy in terms of shares in the market, and in terms of their size and their importance for the country. In terms of sources, just to be clear, I have no directly affected people I know, no friends or relatives working in the industry, either as flight attendants or pilots, or in the unions, or on government side, or in management positions. So I can't rely on that. So my sources are purely articles, where I try to have a good diversity as well between articles of all the big renowned newspapers worldwide, as well as some more independent sources, blogs, etc., who also comment, let's say, on those news. Then I would also like to disclaim that while, as it is a quite economic topic as well, there will be quite some numbers, and even though I work in my daily job also on finances. I am not a pure economist. I've never studied economy myself, so please bear with me when I will try to explain to you everything as well as possible, but of course I rely as well on your comments and your help. If there's anything that you would like to add or to verify, to detail on this, please feel free. And last but not least, very important for my opinion and the way I will go about it is also like I will be careful to really judge bailouts and situations very sharply, but part of the values that I will look for in these bailouts and in these case studies are not only the sheer size, the money involved, the employees and workers affected, etc. But what I would also try to look at as much as I can is on the sustainability of this deal, of these bailouts, and not only also in the way that sustainability today is used, also in the ecological term, of course, but not strictly, more in terms of whether this agreement is viable not only for the short, but also for the mid or long-term future, knowing full well that at the moment to plan long-term is really difficult, especially in this area. But yeah, research for these topics has been very fruitful so far, and very interesting, different types of ways to go about it. So with that being said, you should be now prepped as well as possible for the first case study to be discussed. So let me change the board and I'll be back with you in a moment. And so the second board is about our first case study, which is regarding the United States bailout program. And especially with regards to the three main airlines which we will discuss today, Delta, American Airlines, and United. So how did this go? In the month of March already, there were several discussion rounds, and finally, within the CARES Act, which is the major $2 trillion big package that the Treasury of the United States put out there for struggling businesses during the times of the COVID-19. Negotiations were done with the airline industry, and in April, first half of April, there was an agreement on $50 billion worth of bailout money. These 50 billion are split into two different packages. The first package of, two equal packages of 25 billion US dollars, sorry. Both of them, as far as could be read in the media, are for a timeline of 10 years. Why a timeline here? Because we are now at the first batch of those 50 billion US dollars. The first 25, they are split into 70% of those 25 billion are grants, and 30% are loans. And so the difference between grants and loans, just for those who are not so economically fit, let's say, the grants are basically money that is being, that's why the word granted, given to the airlines, which they don't have to, are not expected to pay back to the government, and therefore are directly, let's say, subsidized by the taxpayer as it is government money. And 30% of that is loans, and those loans have to be then repaid until a maximum of 10 years. And actually the interest rates, which is also an interesting point, are as low as 1% only. We will get to that in the third and last board. What does it mean in terms of actual numbers? But just to give you an idea, 1% of an interest rate does not sound only really low, but analysts have said that before the Corona crisis and before this bailout was agreed, regular interest rates for government loans were between 2 to a maximum of 6%, with the unsecured type of loans, which this bailout is and these loans are qualified as, were as high as between 4 and 6%. So that's a 4 to 6 time low interest rate in these times. So yeah, a very big concession there. And then the second $25 billion are 100% loans, although I will get to that later in the third board. That pot apparently has not been tapped yet, has not been allocated yet, and is remained to be seen even regarding the loans, how the percentage will be divided, or how the percentage will be of the loans. And by the way, the loans of these 30% will be for 1%, around 1% for the first 5 of the 10 years, and then after these 5 years, for the second half of that duration, should it not have been paid back until then, market interest rates at that time will then apply. So that's the general financial circumstances and details of this loan and of the bailout as such. What are the conditions that the airlines have to comply with? Well, first of all, no furloughs through September 2020. So in the next month, until the end of September, no furloughs. And just again, as an explanation, furloughs are sort of temporary layoff, which unfortunately a lot of times does become permanent after a while. But those furloughs are not allowed if the bailout is accepted by the airline. If money from the bailout is used, no furloughs through September 2020, in an attempt to, at least in the short term, protect those workers that are employed in those airlines, so that they receive their regular pay. They can during those times they can pay their bills, meet their needs, etc. Second one is the minimum connectivity, which should be respected and upheld sorry, during at least this first period until the end of September, but also further as we go along further. Minimum connectivity means, just to give you an example, if an airline was flying, and by the way, this minimum connectivity is especially designed for internal domestic travel in the US, not so much internationally, as anyway borders are closed. So of course this applies to domestic travel. And so, for example, if one of these airlines was flying a route 5 times a week, several times daily, then the airline can reduce it, but can reduce the frequency, but is not allowed to reduce it further than one minimum flight per day if they were flying that route 5 times a week before. So they have to remain flying them every day a week, 5 days a week, but with a minimum of 1 flight instead of multiple that they did previously. And several other categories like that were also enshrined in these conditions. Thirdly, the suspension of dividend payments to shareholders and buybacks of shares. Now, this is until September 2021, so a little over a year. But here maybe a little detail on, I mean, dividends to shareholders. I think it's pretty obvious. Now, the buybacks of shares have been one very contentious issue, especially in the US. Have not read about it as much in other markets and other in other countries. But what does it mean? What are buybacks of shares for those, again, who are economically and not as inept as in the economic language as others? So buybacks of shares means basically all these companies, like most of the airlines, are noted at the stock exchange. So they sell shares of their company as well, and the stock exchange and in general shares of their company. And a way to, and of course it works like that you have a better reputation and you have a better situation in the market. The market views it as more positive if your company, which is listed, has close to none or very few shares left to sell in the market. That means, or the market would therefore think, that your company is doing well because its shares are well sought after, and so that puts you in a better position. What most of these airlines did in the last 6 to 7 years at least, it became more and more en vogue, was to actually sales that they have sold and they have given into the market, they have bought them back with cash they had, with surplus they had from their own business, from their own profits, and therefore they have in that way increased their company's value on the market. Now, why was that a very contentious issue? Because as you all know, as people who have been flying in the recent years in different airlines across the globe, and especially I guess you guys from the US who will watch it can relate to that a lot. Airlines in general globally have, while they have really been having quite good profits, not everyone, of course, that's how the market works, but a lot of the bigger airlines have had good profits along the years. But at the same time, they have curbed some of the quality of flying in terms of more seats in airplanes in order to fly more passengers, in order to get more profit, resulting in smaller seats, less comfort, different classes as well. So at some point there was not any more economy business, but an economy, premium economy, sometimes including the same economy, some kind of more basic economy with where you had to pay almost for everything extra, etc., etc. And all that was designed to maximize profit. And then the major contentious question here was that the public, especially, and also the lawmakers in the US have said, okay, if you would have used that money, or at least large part of that money, in order to either treat your workers better or at least build some reserves so that you wouldn't have to ask that much now, like other companies in other market segments other than airline industry did, then that would have been better. So curb that, and at least until 2021 in September. And then last but not least, limit the compensation payment for executives until March 2022. Now that is a pretty general point. I couldn't for the life of me find exact details of what executive exactly means. Is it really position based? Is it based on a minimum income or maximum income, and what does limit mean? Is there a certain threshold? That was quite difficult to find, and I didn't find really exact details on that, but it is across the board mentioned as one of the major conditions that were laid down for those who want to get a bailout. So, does that sound good to you? I mean, reading, okay, money is a lot, conditions are at the same time not too bad, I would say, on the first view. But let's go to the third and last board and see how that was actually applied. As I said, that deal is already a little over a month old. And let's get to the next board to see how that was actually applied and is it really as good as it seems or not. So stay tuned and I'll change the board. So the last board of this video is about the question of how the airlines took the bailout and about the conclusions on what can we expect next and whether this bailout, in my opinion, has been effective and where there has been some lacking, maybe opportunities or questions. So briefly, American Airlines, with a roundabout 130,000 employees, so the biggest of the three, took 5.8 billion US dollars as GL. It means grant and loan. So if you remember, that was the first part of the package where 70% were paid as grants and 30% were loans, especially attributed to the payments of regular salaries of employees until the end of September this year. So 5.8 billion from that package and 4.75 billion already announced, let's say, from the second package of the second 25 billion US dollars on loans. So that's a total of 10.55 billion. Delta, with an approximate 90,000 employees, a little bit more, we're taking 5.4 billion US dollars from the first package, 4.6 billion dollars from the second, which brings to a grand total of 10 billion dollars. And United, with as well around about 90,000 employees. So which brings all of that a total of over 300,000 employees for all the three of them. They took 5 billion US dollars from the grant loan package and 4.5 billion US dollars from the loans, which brings it to a total of 9.5 billion and a grand total of a little over 30 billion US dollars, sorry, from the total of 50 million possible. You have here. So now, what's the issue here, and why did I insinuate already with my question in the last board? If doesn't it sound good? Well, it does, but at the same time, there are quite some shortcomings, I would say. On the one hand, I mean, just to be clear, I understand that for both parts. The negotiations must have been quite difficult because on one hand, the government side always will likely have to mitigate and to find compromises between, on one hand, stimulating the economy and not letting some of their major players die, but on the other hand, also protecting their future interests, the interests of the taxpayer, etc. In the best case scenario, at least. And on the other hand, the airlines, of course, who try to get into the negotiations, of course, trying to limit as much as possible the concessions that they would have to make, that I laid down in the conditions part in the last board. So, but at the same time, the part of protecting the workers from furloughs and layoffs, that's only until the end of September. What about the 1st of October? What will happen then? Already pretty much after the deal, all the airlines across the board more or less announced that it might be inevitable to lay off or at least furlough some employees, considerable amount even, as of the 1st of October. Then during the last weeks already some airlines, especially Delta, United as well a little bit, and American, I think, planned it. I'm not sure if they went through with it, but all of them went through, or at least planned, the the question of significantly reducing working hours, because of course the government grants and loans until the end of September forbid them for furloughing their employees completely. But what is the next best thing? Reduce working hours, therefore the pay is also reduced, and therefore you would save costs. There have been quite some controversies, especially in the case of Delta Airlines. Them and JetBlue, they went through with it. Several, especially Democrat senators, but also some others, protested that, and then they took it back. But already most of the CEOs and most of the airline executives that I could find with statements online said that if they're not doing it now, from the 1st of October, it's very highly likely that at least reduced working hours would be necessary in order to avoid furloughs and layoffs. Or if that's not the case, or if it's not the case enough and in a higher enough scale, then they would have to let go quite a lot of people, which leads me also a bit to the missed opportunities point, because I feel that in that aspect, but also in some other aspects, there might have been some possibilities to protect the workers further and to not do it until the end of September, but prolong it a little bit. I know that every month, every hour, every day, airlines are losing money while flying empty planes, etc. I get that, but until the end of September is already good, but there might have been a missed opportunity to prolong that a little bit further. Also in terms of making the ecological outcome and the ecological developments of those planes, ecological sustainability, part of that bailout deal that has been, as far as my understanding goes, part of the Democrats' proposals, but that has been scrapped out of the final bailout agreement. But that might be still something to look at, although it's also true that apart from cutting working hours, cutting contracts of workers, one of the major restructuration actually of most of the airlines, not only of the American airlines here listed, is the shrinking of the fleet that will have to happen. And by shrinking of the fleet, most of the older airlines will be the first to go out. And most of the older airlines also are the less fuel efficient. So by cutting them off, and if replacing them with newer and more fuel efficient airlines, might in itself already provide an added benefit in that point. And then I guess that at the latest, I think in the end of this year, probably if the economy is not going to improve very much, probably there are going to be renegotiations, probably I wouldn't rule out new bailouts being negotiated, and then at that point I guess that maybe some of those missed opportunities could be addressed. We should see about that. And last but not least, I would also think that with the general aviation industry, how it is going, and with the clear signal by most of the global players that they are not thinking that a global air travel will come back to levels of before COVID until maybe even 2023. And then also with regards to the American market, especially to those three big ones, big airlines, that more and more voices are saying that it's quite likely that at least one of them would have to go bankrupt. So might it be that we see in the months and years going forward that some of them will cease to exist as we know them? Because, and that might be a whole issue for another video, but actually bankruptcies are also a lot of times mistaken from airlines going completely out of business. That does not necessarily have to be. Actually, quite some, if not all of these three major airlines have been already bankrupt in the last 20 to 30 years. Mergers have been constructed after that, and they have then come back at some shape or form. And even through those bankruptcies, They have then also been able to keep most of their staff. So bankruptcies does not necessarily have to mean the end of the airline as such, or like the end of the airline in general. But maybe it is inevitable in order to restructure the airlines and make them fit for the post-COVID era. So with that being said, I would say there have been some good ideas, protecting workers at least for a couple of months, having also loans is a good thing. The interest rates were a bit very low. Some things could have been done in a better way, I guess. But again, I think renegotiations are quite likely, and maybe some of the missed opportunities might be addressed at a later stage. So with that being said, I hope that you liked that video. If you have any comments, suggestions, corrections, anything, you're welcome. Send me a message, write a comment. And if you liked it, please, again, put a comment, like, subscribe, put the notification button on, so you're going to be notified when I put the next airline bailout video on. And if you have missed my first two videos, I will link them also in the description of this video below. So thanks very much for tuning in. It was a bit of a longer video, I know, but is also a very big case, and I hope you liked it. If you did, hope to see you soon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Fader,